Take it away. Hey, everyone. Lee Riley here. Thanks, Hannah, for having me. Appreciate the chance to talk about this topic and to greet all of you. Let me just ask real quick, have we met before in a Zoom room or maybe in an actual classroom somewhere? I do a number of workshops here on campus. Anybody? I can't see all the hands, so it's just going to be one of those things. Oh, there's one. Okay. Jenny, good deal. All right. Well, so this is one of my favorite topics. Given the theme of the whole you and sort of New Year's and resolutions and refocusing, I think it's really appropriate for the things that I do here, for the kind of training that I do. And like I just said, it's one of my favorite topics because it's really fundamental. And for me personally, it explains a lot. It explains a lot, like within myself as a person and as a leader. It also explains a lot in the workplace and kind of why people show up the way they do. And probably, I like to say sort of tongue in cheek that it'll explain why you love the people you love in some ways, and then why you struggle with some of the people that you struggle with, and including yourself. And so, and then we'll talk a little bit about how we adjust I'll define it first, and then what an adaptive skill is, and then we'll talk about how we grow. And this is going to be a simple schematic, but let me just say right off the bat that it is not simple. This is always lifelong work. And so just keep that in mind, even though we're going to kind of present it as a bit of a formula. But I think the principle still stands. So anyway, without further ado, let's jump in. One last quick note, though. The chat bar is there. If you have a question, want to make a point, a comment, absolutely just chime in, and I'll try to catch everybody as we move along. All right, so improving your adaptive skills. Let's do this. Let's define what an adaptive skill is. And can everybody see my screen okay? Okay, good deal. So an adaptive skill is one component, you might say, of your overall skill set. In this triangle here, this sort of awkward triangle, represents the totality of what we can call your skill set that you bring to work as well as life itself. And I'm going to break this down and analyze it, and we're going to see where it takes us. The top level of the pyramid, we're going to call these job-specific skills, and these are the easy ones because they're obvious, and these are things that we've trained for, that we've gone to maybe like college or a training program, an internship. These are things that are represented on our resume. When we read a job description, often they're describing job-specific skills that we need for the work that we're doing. Yes, Snan, I can send the slides out later for sure. Thank you for asking. So job-specific skills, it's obviously a lifelong work to grow these. If we want to change careers, then we are probably going to, we're going to change these as well. In fact, these are called career-specific skills. And here's some examples. Repairing an engine. This is a random set of examples. There are hundreds. Using a CAD/CAM program, for instance, teaching 7th grade math or conducting an orchestra. These are skills that you would use, again, in a career track that would not transition or translate well to another career track necessarily, okay? So they're concrete, we train for them, simple enough. The next layer of skill is called a transferable skill. And these are also skills, things that we grow in and that we pick up along the way. We don't roll out of bed with these, but they come sometimes in a different way than maybe the hard skills or the job-specific skills. And these are things that we might go to a training program for, but we might also just pick them up as we go through our work life and life itself. For instance, general computer skills. Most jobs require some kind of computer skills, and you'll pick up what that is. Public speaking, managing a budget, leading a meeting. These are things that, again, you can take to a different career. So most careers, you can use things like this. And again, the list could be somewhat endless because there are many of these. And so those are transferable skills. Still pretty easy to identify. And you'll kind of know if you got it, and if you lead meetings and you struggle, well, then you can grow that skill in a number of ways. Okay, simple enough. The final layer of skill that we bring to the work is a bit more subtle and not one that we hear about a lot. And I'm going to call these adaptive skills. And the quick and ready definition that I'm going to use here is this. These are the skills I brought with me from childhood that make or break success in almost everything I do. Okay, these are the skills I brought with me from childhood. So right away, we see that these are sort of the way that I show up to not only work, but to the rest of my life. They come from early developmental forces and factors, your family of origin, your early caregivers, early experiences, and they are fundamental. And they tend to make or break almost everything I do. Let me give some examples and we'll see if this doesn't work itself out. Listening well to other people, managing strong emotions, managing stress, engaging conflict constructively. Okay, can you see how those are ways that we show up that it's kind of hard to see? It's sort of like the air that we breathe. Does that make sense? I mean, like and we can see these in individuals, you know, where these are just sort of patterns of behavior. It's a little bit like the rose-colored glasses, where it's how you see the world. Adaptive skills are such that it's the way we do what we do, and we don't often notice them until something isn't working. Okay, and then we hear about it, maybe, you know, maybe because something actually isn't working, it broke down, maybe a relationship broke down, or maybe we're getting some feedback from our environment saying, hey, this isn't working. Okay, and so let me ask all of you, and you can just reply in the chat bar if you want to, or use your microphone, that's fine. Have you known somebody who, let's say, they were the rock star when it comes to job specific skills? You know, they had the pedigree, went to all the right schools, you know, just the resume was stellar, and yet they did not know how to collaborate with other people who did not think like them. You know, they couldn't manage themselves in a stressful situation, and stress leaked out over everybody else. And then you add to this another dimension of, let's say they have authority in the organization. Let's say they're your boss or your boss's boss, or the top dog in the system, right? Okay, and so you know, it's not easy to see, or it's not difficult to see that the skill sets are important, the job specific and even transferable skills, but these adaptive skills, I think, are easy to say are the most important long term, because they will unravel the good intentions that come from other things that we're trying to do. Okay, let's take a look. Let's see here, Tina. Yes, definitely know someone like that. Lost their job due to an inability to engage conflict. Well, I'll tell you, you know, if you're an organizational leader, there's a lot of things you have to do that tap into this adaptive skill domain. And engaging conflict constructively is one of them in a big way. Listening well. We're going to practice that in a moment, actually. So these are they really show up in leadership, but I'll tell you they're everywhere too, because, you know, leadership in an organization like the university is not fundamentally different than having authority over other people in other domains. And so, yeah, John, I see your question there. Let's hold off on that. I'll ask some questions at the end and do our best to kind of give some answers to that for sure. And you'll have my email as well too. So, and you can ask that after the fact. So let's talk about this, top 10 adaptive skills for the workplace. This is my bit of a laundry list. These are the things that I see the most as somebody who works with a lot of staff and leaders at the UW and elsewhere. And these always come back to get us one way or the other. And these are the most common ones where there are challenges. Listening so that others feel heard and respected. Okay, that's a top one. Receiving corrective feedback non-defensively. How many of you know you get defensive when something corrective or critical kind of comes your direction one way or the other? I mean, come on, everybody raise your hand, right? Everybody, come on, be honest. Yeah, I mean, like it's a human thing to defend ourselves for lots of reasons. And so, but being able to receive that feedback non-defensively is fundamental for creating a positive work environment. mean, think about it. If, and you know this because you maybe have had a supervisor who could not receive corrective feedback. Like if your employees experience you, or even a colleague, a peer experiences you as is really defensive, they're going to try to have that conversation once, right? After that, when you deflect it, however you do it, we learn very quickly that we just don't go there. Okay, and there's all sorts of things that you lose if you can't have those kinds of conversations in the workplace, especially if you're the boss, but whether even if you're a peer. And if you're an employee who's getting corrective feedback from, let's say, your supervisor, learning and growing and hearing it and responding constructively is always a part of the growth process. And so even it's still important there too. Let's see what else we have. Giving corrective feedback without creating defensiveness. I'll tell you, when it's your turn to share something with a colleague, it's easy to blow things up, or it's easy to soft pedal it and make it palatable so nobody feels uncomfortable. Well, both of those are generally ineffective over the long haul. You've got to tell the truth and do it in such a way that people can hear it. And that's a skill. This is a promo. That's one of my workshops. I can tell you about it later. But that's important. That's a leadership skill. That's a peer skill. That's a life skill. Okay. How about this one? Seeing a situation from another person's point of view. Okay. We all have our perspective, and your perspective is not necessarily wrong, but it may not be all that's needed in any particular moment when you have to figure out, what really happened in a situation, what really is going on, how do you solve something? Okay. And so, really important that we were able to get out of our perspective into somebody else's perspective. And that, again, that's an adaptive skill. It's not easy to do. Number 5, embracing conflict as an opportunity for growth. I mean, again, this goes back to a comment earlier, conflict is simply that we have a different view on a situation, and our sense of the way things should be is not shared. Okay. Or the way things are, or the reason for a situation. I mean, that happens all the time. And so now we've got a situation where we don't agree. Fine. Welcome to life, right? And if we're going to move forward in this situation, there's a really good chance we're going to have to figure out and mesh those gears a bit so that we can move forward and find a resolution. Otherwise, we just go to our respective corners and we just don't talk about it. And then you've got a compounding problem. Okay. Yeah, Laura, I agree. Conflict can be great, actually. I'll even say more than good. It can be great because when you have to work closely with people, you're going to run into conflict, even if it's sort of the low-level run-of-the-mill stuff. This isn't like angry stapler throwing conflict. This is about like a disagreement over how to do something that you do every day. Now you've got a great chance to figure it out, have that conversation, hear each other, and then solve a problem that now you can be more on the same page on moving forward. And that's a great thing. Like in every domain, it's a great thing, but it's a skill. What else? Managing my stress and not projecting it onto other people. Wow, this is a big one. We all get stressful. Stress is a part of life. We all have a stress response, and unchecked, we will always project that onto the environment around us. We will change our behavior, and that behavior will send signals. And if, especially again, if we're a supervisor or we have organizational authority over others, that stress is felt even more. And so you'll have your own unique behavior stress pattern. And so learning what that is and how to manage it is a big part of being an effective individual, but leader, peer, colleague, whatever. So exercising my authority when I'd rather be nice. How many of you want to be liked? Like in your job? Let's say that you're a supervisor here. I know not everybody is. I mean, if you have authority, let's say if you have kids at home, you're a supervisor functionally. Okay, so these power dynamics are really everywhere in life. Most of us want to be liked, for sure, but sometimes we simply have to make the hard call, say the difficult thing, and that's part of what the role requires. Okay, and if you are a supervisor or you have that authority over others, you really have to be willing to say, you know what, there's a bigger long-term goal here than simply the positive emotion between the two of us in the moment. We all want that. That's fantastic. But we can have a long-term compromise over a short-term gain. And that's, I think that's useful to remember. Okay. And I will say, people generally respect us more when we're willing to make those hard decisions responsibly. We know it's the right thing, even though, we don't like it in the moment necessarily. Owning mistakes quickly and proactively. I mean, it's a big deal. People notice your mistakes. The question is, do we notice our mistakes? Okay, and when we can get ahead of that, and we don't have to have the system around us remind us of a mistake, then we're in a way better place to build trust and respect that really is part of being in community with other employees, with anybody really. We hope we have gracious people around us that'll help us to see our stuff when need be. But if we always put it on our environment to keep us in check because we don't think about it and own it, we just create way unnecessary stress, way unnecessary stress. And we just erode confidence in our own self and our own perspective. Being able to make unpopular decisions confidently related to before, okay? It's what you got to do. It's what you got to do. And then another one, being clear and direct in my communication, especially when it's not something that's pleasant. But if it's true and it needs to be said, you got to say it. Okay, so these are things that our list could continue. Our list could continue for sure. But these are things that I see come up all the time. And I'll tell you, these kinds of things, in my experience, undermine credibility in the workplace pretty quickly if we're not at least saying, hey, I'm going to take it seriously and do my best to kind of keep these growing. Okay. And so, and I imagine most of us, we will struggle from these. In fact, that's my next question for you. We won't do breakouts for the sake of time, but why don't you throw in the chat function? And here's my question. Which adaptive skills do you struggle with the most? Name one or two. Let's just all kind of get on the same page here. Throw in the chat bar. Which ones can you say right now, this is where I have some growing to do? And give it about 60 to 90 seconds here. Managing stress, gotcha. Number 6. All right. So as you can see, we're all in the same boat. You've got yours, I've got mine, and we're all in the same boat. And in a sense, it matters a little bit, I suppose, which one it is, depending on the context. They're always context dependent, but in a sense, it doesn't matter because they impact everything we do in virtually every part of our interaction with people. Again, whether it be the workplace or at home, I'm guessing most of you. It's funny, when I do this workshop in person, I almost invariably get somebody commenting about their teenage kids and how this shows up with them, something like that, or with family members or with an intimate partner, how these are things that impact, all sorts of things. And so they're really everywhere, Okay, so we're all in the same boat. Let's move on and let's talk about improving adaptive skills. And how do we do this? And this is where I said before, this is a bit formulaic, and I think it's still valid, but I don't want it to make it sound like it's super easy, because it's not. But there is a bit of a pathway, and that's what I want to identify now. And so the first thing you do is you identify the adaptive skill you want to improve, and then you have a 2-part process. And identifying that, I mean, you've already done that work a little bit right here for sure. So, seriously, this is where it starts. And then, this is where having great relationships with colleagues who can help you, ask some of these questions. Maybe you've got a supervisor that you trust. Hey, can you give me some feedback? If you are a supervisor, I'll tell you, having this kind of a conversation with employees with boundaries for sure, but asking these transparent conversations can be really a great trust building moment, because they know that you also are you have standards and expectations that you're going to hold up for yourself, because every employee knows that we have these, but you're going to hold them up for yourself, and that's important. All right, let's take a look. Here's what we do. So there's two parts. We analyze an adaptive skill. Adaptive skills always show up in two parts. The first we're going to call the behaviors, and these are what others experience. These are simply what is on the outside, what others see and hear. Okay, that's the first part of this, because these all show up. Even if you're a bit of a reserved individual, and let's say you handle stress by retreating. That's a common way to handle stress. You retreat. You kind of withdraw, you circle your wagons, you don't talk too much, well, that's a behavior that employees or colleagues have to now work with, because, maybe you have information that they need and you're not clarifying things as much, for instance. And so when you withdraw, you're impacting the dynamics that you've established, assuming they were healthy. Okay, so even though you're not maybe, going off the rails, yelling at people, that, everything has impact. Okay. So the next one is mindset. What's going on inside of you and what are you thinking and feeling? So these are always together in virtually every one of our actions, even if we're not aware of it. And part of the first work is to analyze both of these dimensions in this adaptive skill. And this is simply the work of self-reflection. Okay. So let's do a little bit of that here. What I do is I identify, and then I take my adaptive skill, and I'm looking at the behavior side of this first, and I break down the adaptive skill into its individual component parts. We're going to do that in a moment here, so you have an illustration. You break it down into its individual component parts. You consciously practice these new behaviors every opportunity you get. So you practice, and this is muscle memory. Everything gets easier with practice. You are literally training your physiology, your biology, your neurology to respond in a different way than what you have been you've patterned yourself to respond to. And again, a lot of this, like we said before, comes from early developmental forces, that things that, like we may not even understand we don't know where they come from, but it's what we have, and we know it's not working very well. Okay. And so we can still analyze these patterns once we see them. The second part is the mindset. And again, this is what's going on inside of me, either what I'm feeling or what I'm thinking. Once I identify it, here's how we do this. We're honest to ourselves about what I'm feeling. I'm fearful, I'm angry, I'm feeling threatened. Whatever it is, it's super helpful. In fact, I would say kind of maybe necessary to name what I'm feeling, because there's something driving us in that moment. It drives all of us. Okay. If you have somebody, in your world that you're threatened by for some reason, you will change your behavior, or you'll be tempted to change your behavior around them. And to name, hey, that's what's going on within me, then I just got to name it. It doesn't really help you to not look at the cause and own it. Practice differentiation. That means that I have these feelings, but I can act differently. Before, this situation always evoked this really frustration in me that then I acted out in some way. Well, that's been this sort of stimulus response pattern for a long time, probably. And now you can say, well, now I can experience that stimulus, this event that makes me frustrated. And I can say, whoa, let's sort of break the chain, and I can respond differently. I can think differently. And I'm going to differentiate myself from my emotions. I'm not my emotions. I don't have to react. Okay. Yes, lots of practice, Amanda. This can be deeply personal, so find additional resources as needed. I'm just going to say it, that sometimes this goes back to very personal, deep, formative forces, as I mentioned before. And it's helpful to say, okay, can't fix anything overnight. Maybe there's a conversation to be had around some of these things. And this is where it's a good friend. It's a counselor, perhaps. It's meditation, mindfulness. It's these sort of tools that we don't think about as being directly professional development, but I'll tell you right now, they are, if it's the right tool in the right place, the right time, because they impact this layer of how you show up to your environment. And so the deal is, you do what you got to do, whatever that is. Okay, you do what you got to do. Okay, remember, a change in mindset makes a change in behavior much easier. Okay, it's not automatic, but it makes it much easier. So if we can adjust these more subterranean forces, then we can maybe change our behavior a little bit easier. It's good that those things are congruent. And here's my last point for this. Give yourself a lot of compassion. How come? Why is this important? This is not a trivial detail I'm tossing in on the top. Why is this important? We make mistakes. We're human. Absolutely. It takes time. Okay. Time and effort to repattern. I like it. Yep. It's hard work. Failure. And yeah, I mean, Sandra, we're just critical on ourselves. I mean, I would say if you care, and hopefully we all care, then we can be critical towards ourselves for sure, especially if we see this is something that is not working well for us and therefore maybe not for others. And so this whole cycle of sort of self-doubt and self-criticism can kick in. And so being malleable with ourselves and kind to ourselves is not a trivial part of this happening, especially if you recognize that you have, made a little bit of a mess with this. You've not helped the situation. You've not helped yourself. Okay. All right, let's take a look. Improving your adaptive skills. And we're going to kind of boil this down to first, there's those two internal and external behaviors and what's going on inside of me. And now it's a 4-part process. And you'll see how this maps out. So first, you've got the what we call the unconscious incompetence. And this is you don't know that you don't know how to do something, right? We're just going through life. Things have functioned well enough to sort of allow us to navigate in such a way. But we realize that, well, we don't know what we don't know. Okay, we don't know what we don't know. So lots of reasons for that. The next one is now we have the stage of conscious incompetence. And we know that we don't know how to do something, and we let it bother us. And so you go from the first box, I don't know what I don't know. Somehow I find out about this, and maybe some feedback from a colleague. Hey, you know what? Can I give you some feedback? You talk over people in meetings quite a bit, and I've noticed this pattern for a while, and it, and here's how I think it's received. Okay. Wow. Now I know. And then I do a quick scan. And that's actually like what I do kind of a lot of places now that I think about it with my friends and maybe my kids and maybe my partner. And, it's this reflexive thing. And now I take it seriously because now I see it. Okay. And it bothers me. And now comes the hard work. Conscious competence. This is where we break it down. And I know, that you know how to do something, but it takes effort. You know what to do now. I know what to do because I've broken it down into steps now, but it takes effort. Okay, let's do this. We're going to practice this. And so we can illustrate how this actually works. So it's the assignment real quickly here is listening so that others feel heard and respected. Okay. I'll tell you right now, that's a fundamental relationship skill. You don't leave home without it, right? Every relationship needs this sort of posture. It's not the only thing we bring, of course, but it's a fundamental one. Meaning, if you don't have this, every relationship gets to be of substance. Of course, gets to be compromised in time. Okay, so here's the question for you. And you can just drop your responses into the chat bar. So a colleague that you have a good relationship with, at least maybe a great relationship, they have something they want to talk about with you that's important to them. It's a bigger issue than just, oh, by the way. So they invite you to coffee or to lunch, and there you go. You're off together, and they're sharing with you. This is obviously important to them. What do you do that they can observe? This is that first part, behaviors. What do you do that signals to them that you are listening and therefore you care and they might feel respected? All right, we got to go. I'm not, okay, put phone away. Eye contact. Yep. nodding, asking questions, full attention, undivided attention, and like think behaviors, because attention, like what does that mean? How do I know that you're getting my attention? There's things that I do that signal things. These are behaviors. Now I'll tell you, this is sort of a Western view of things. Different cultures will be a little different in how they pick up on subtle social cues, because there's an enculturation that we all have wherever we grow up. So these are generally the Western orientation, how we listen to one another. So just to have that caveat. Body face towards them, eye contact, phones down. Yeah, Heather, I like that. Not injecting your own story, unless there's always some qualifications. Maybe it does unpack their story more, but how many of you have ever like hijacked a conversation or have had your conversations hijacked because they have a cooler story than your story, right? I mean, the temptation's there, absolutely. So yeah, you're on the right track. These are all behaviors. Eye contact, attentive posture, paraphrasing. Hey, so what I'm hearing you say is, boom. How many of you have been in a conversation with somebody and they can paraphrase you better than you can say you? Like they get it in a way that you had a hard time describing, right? That, boy, few things will say, I get you and I'm listening, than that move right there. Ask clarifying questions, empathetic reflection, avoid distractions, don't hijack the conversation, don't be a fixer. You all know what that is. Don't be a fixer. There's a time and place to fix something. There's a time and place to listen. And that's not an easy one, but you'll figure that out. And then check back later. This is circling back and saying, hey, that thing about whatever, your kid's recital or that work issue that you talked about last week, how's it going? Few things say that I care about your issue than something like that. And yeah, I like that. Thank them for reaching out. Perfect. So let's do this. So the mindset internally, and these are the things that help us to stay focused in the moment. This is what's going on inside of me. And this is what I got to tell myself. Sometimes this is natural and organic. Sometimes it's not. Their opinion matters, even if you don't agree with it. This is the respect that we give to each other. You may not agree. That's not the question in this moment, right? Their issue is important, even if it isn't to you personally, right? They've got a thing that they want to discuss with you. And so for the sake of this moment, now down the road, maybe you talk about that, who knows? But for this moment, you're getting into their mindset. And then focus on their story and try to connect the dots and define their logic and what their point is, okay? And so these are the components of active listening. Now, let me ask you, do you actually, let's say you're, well, let me ask, do you actually have to like this person that you're talking with if you do these things? Yeah, I mean, let's say you're a supervisor, right? And is it a professional responsibility to embody this in the moment when you're across the table from an employee? It is. I mean, it totally is. Are you sending a clear message about what you want to be about as a manager or as a colleague when you do these things, And so we may not be on the same page. We may not even like them. We might not have a very strong relationship. It's always easiest to find a place within yourself where you do care about them. It's very difficult to sort of fake it, but fake it we must if that's the best we have in the moment. And I just want to make that point. That's not being inauthentic. That's an adult social skill and certainly a leadership skill that we just simply practice. Okay. Yeah, there is space to relate with someone even if you don't like them. That's a great distinction. Very worthwhile distinction for sure. So here's the cool thing is you get to the last box here, and now we have what we call unconscious competence. You know how to do something, and it becomes second nature. When you practice something like this and you're consciously shifting what you've always done, literally neurologically and then behaviorally, you do things differently moving forward. So where now that new behavior is pushed below the level of your direct awareness. And you just do it. And now you have the mental resources to do other things because you've gone through this process. Okay, you're no longer battling it. Let me give an illustration. This exact diagram came up in my daughter's driver's ed class. And the instructor made a great point. He says the first like 3 days behind the wheel with the learner's permit, everything is hyper conscious. Where you put your hands in the steering wheel, your feet, all the rules of the road, how much do you beforehand do you put on your turn signal? Everything is hyper conscious, super overwhelming. Like making a left-hand turn feels like all you can possibly do, right? Well, fast forward a few months later, you're not a perfect driver yet, but you've pushed all of this below the level of awareness because you're, again, neurologically, you've adapted. And that's the cool thing about this. And then, of course, years later, you don't even think about it until you get to sort of challenging situations, a snowy, icy road at Stevens Pass, where you got to think about now, how do I do this? Outside of that, it's all reflexive. And that's exactly how these adaptive skills work. And all adaptive skills can be broken down in this way and practice kind of from the ground up. Okay. Does that make sense? I mean, it's, again, super simple formula, but it is work and attention, and it takes a lot of focus in the moment around certain things. But I'll tell you, it gets easier. I mean, it's everything in life. It's going to the gym, like the first 3 weeks just are awful, like, but if you're consistent, next thing you know, you actually might even like it. And now the patterns are building. How do we move from stage 1 to stage 2? Unconscious competence to conscious incompetence? Is that the question? Nazreen? I would say that's a great question. I would say that you're paying attention to things internal to you. You ask yourself, as you go through your work day, or your life, wherever the domain you want to examine, where are those points where this is how I think about it. Where are those points where I feel pressure? I feel tension. I feel like some kind of a dis-ease about this situation. Like I'm, often that's what they're signals that this is not really what I want it to be. And that can be a lot of different internal states, you might say. But maybe it's a certain kind of conversation with a certain person, like we converse pretty well on a lot of things, but there's this one area where we don't talk very well, and where it's a little threatening, and we need to, because we want to have a better relationship and solve more problems together and be more in sync. Well, that's a good sign right there that having that kind of a conversation is an adaptive skill that you can grow on. For instance, that's one way to look at it. Obviously, feedback from your environment is great. If you get people and colleagues who can give you some feedback, that's a great way to go. So yeah, Amanda, yeah, request feedback, absolutely. Make that a part of your conversations. It'll be a little bit tiresome to do that all the time, but on occasion with people, yeah, absolutely. Again, developing that self-awareness is a big deal. So well, I won't go into my own personal stories, but just don't ask my kids about some of these things, because they'll give you all sorts of stories, and it's just simply there. And so, so let's do this. We got a couple of minutes. And what I want to do is one more example, but I'm gonna have to go a little quicker here. Is that all right if I kind of do the water hose thing, fire hose, with this going quick? Because we've got about 7 minutes left, and I want to go through one more, and this is a classic, how to receive corrective feedback non-defensively. This is a longer section, but let me just go through it quickly for the sake of yeah. So the first question is simple. Why is it important that leaders know how to receive corrective feedback? This comes out of my management leadership larger course, but it goes for everybody. I mean, why is it important that colleagues learn how to accept feedback non-defensively? Okay. Bottom line is there's lots of reasons. I'm going to assume you know some of those. I'm going to jump right down into the technique, if you will, and the mindset. I'm going to assume some of this is known, but I'll tell you a couple things right now. What you model, you teach. If you can't accept corrective feedback in a way that people feel safe coming to you with more corrective feedback, you're saying, we don't do that here. That's not how we're going to do our department. We're not going to be honest. We're not going to tell the truth. We're not going to deal with challenges. We're just going to pretend that everything's going to be okay and just skirt around these things. And I don't think that's what any of you want. So you got to figure out how to make it safe. Even if you're and I'll just say this, even if you're the kind of person who doesn't, let's say, get visibly agitated, if you're the kind of person who sort of shuts down and withdraws and maybe gets more emotional in that way, nobody wants to give feedback in that situation either. So there's a kind of a courage in hearing feedback and just stay hanging in the moment. Let me jump ahead a little bit. And corrective feedback, receiving corrective feedback is many ways about managing our own fear, okay? But let's go straight to behaviors. Here's what it looks like. First of all, you practice active listening. We just did that. So like you're really going to go down and let them talk without creating an environment where they want to just not talk. Active listening encourages people to talk, okay, and to share. Because this is a difficult moment. As well as I do, that giving corrective feedback to a colleague, to a peer, to your supervisor, to a friend, to a partner, it's all, it's challenging because we don't know if we're gonna make it through this. How will our relationship survive this moment? Is kind of the lingering question sometimes underneath it. Practice active listening. Ask clarifying questions, especially because you want them to really say what is on their mind and tell you the truth. And you give permission for that as the one receiving it. We send a lot of signals that say, don't go there. You don't want to do that. Second, this is the I get it statement. This is somehow signaling to them that you understand them. Okay, that you get their logic, you get their point. You can see how, from their point of view, they have something valid to say to you. Now, here's the deal. The challenge is, if we do this well, it's going to feel like we are agreeing with people, and we're not there yet. This is a key distinction. You can say, I get it, I hear you. I can see how you think that way, absolutely. That is not agreeing, that's a later deal. The choice point, now we can make a choice, and it's agreeing, stay neutral, or disagree. Okay, simple enough. It's not simple. It's simple conceptually. Executing this in the moment without a lot of stress is not easy, but it is a simple concept. So no matter what, here's the deal. No matter what happens, you have to act like you're not feeling defensive no matter how you actually feel. That's key. And this is that being differentiated, getting out of the moment, taking a deep breath internally and saying, okay, you got this. Okay. What are you telling the other person if you can't do this? And defensiveness is leaking out all over the place. Okay. Simple enough. This is unwelcome. Don't do it again. What else am I going to pick up? Right. But this is what I'm getting from you. What else am I going to, that's the conclusion I will reach. More importantly, or along the way, I'm fragile and can't take honest feedback. And none of us wants to send that message when we say it like that, but I think that's exactly what happens. People who either go into their rabbit hole and disappear around feedback or explode and push it away, that is a sign that their sense of self is too delicate to handle it. And that's a growth area for most of us. And but it's a great thing. Boy, life gets easier when we can grow in that one domain, because then we can take the stuff that comes at us from every sector of the world and handle it better and be more resilient. In fact, this is sort of the foundation of resiliency, honestly. Mindset. Practice differentiation. I am not my emotional reaction. I can choose to be non-defensively. I'm telling myself this along the way. Maybe it's very conscious. Don't take it personally and see it as a professional development opportunity. It's very difficult to not take things personally, but even if people mean it personally, like, separate yourself from that. Do your best, right? Be curious and open. Receive it as you would a gift. Open it, consider it, and thank the giver. So here's sort of my little formula. even if 15 to 20% of their feedback is useful to you, and the rest of it is like, oh boy, not useful, you want that 15%. You want it. So you always look for what's in here for me, even if you know internally that the rest of this is sort of just their perspective. It doesn't have consequence per se. You're going to listen to the whole thing, but that's you want the little bit if it's there. Okay. And then you say thanks. Okay. Don't forget self-compassion. This is big because especially when this has consequence and this comes from, let's say, a superior, we can feel all sorts of things because we can ask, gosh, is my job at stake, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But so be kind to yourself and recognize that we are often the only ones that think that we don't need to grow, and we're surprised when we need to grow. Everybody else in your world knows you need to grow, and you know that everybody else needs to grow, right? I mean, it's just how we think about people. We're the only ones who are surprised when we realize we have to grow. Like kind of ruminate on that for a moment. Like, I'm the only one who thinks that I'm perfect as is. Nobody else in my world doesn't think that. Even my dog, Max, my golden retriever, who loves me, he knows I could be better at doing what I do. Self-compassion is important. We're going to end there because we're out of time. Quick. Oh, you know what? Actually, one last thing. This will take a minute, but this is an important thing. What if I disagree? It's not the same as defensiveness, provided that I've done the first three things well, and I will send you these slides. Listen, ask questions, the I get it statement. You disagree with respect. And if it's your supervisor, then like you got to negotiate that space. Disagreeing may not work, right? Two things you can't disagree about, though, coming from, like, let's say a peer, how someone feels. Like, you made me feel humiliated in that meeting. You don't dismiss that. And then how they perceive the impact you've had on them. Those are subjective things that we just don't really mess with. We just take them as they are and we move on. So, okay. Wow. Bam, bam. There we go. That was a quick 47 minutes. Thank you for being here. I will hang out a little bit afterwards. If anybody wants to ask a quick question, I will